So welcome to the Business to Human podcast. And today we're going to have a guest on. His name is David Raab. He is the founder and CEO of the Customer Data Platform, or CDP Institute. And we're going to talk to him a little bit about CDPs, about the Institute, and some related things there. So I think this will be a good conversation. So welcome, David. Thank you for joining us for this.
Matthew, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I did a bit of an introduction for you there, but would like for you to tell us a little more about who you are, as well as the Institute, and just to talk to us a little bit about that, just for background to help us understand that.
Sure. So I've spent most of my career as a marketing technology consultant, helping companies to select both software and service vendors. Before that, I made a more or less legitimate living as an actual working marketer in the magazine subscription and continuity industry.
Sure.
Which it was been a good background, but most of the time has been spent at that kind of interface between the technologists and the marketing folks, translating between the two of them. The Institute's founded in 2016, so it's 6 years old now. And the Institute really has a mission of helping companies do a better job with their customer data, which often, of course, involves a customer data platform. But, you know, we don't sell anything. We just basically, our job is to educate folks.
Got you. How long has the Institute been in existence?
It's 6 years now.
6 years. Okay. So I think one question that I wanted to have you define, or kind of help us define some things, is the CDP Institute, the CDP. What is a CDP, or a customer data platform? And I ask this in the context of knowing that, you know, there's a lot of things, data warehouses, data lakes, CDP. So there's a lot of just sort of ways that we deal with data, and help us distinguish CDP from maybe some of those other ways, and just generally, what is it and what is it good for?
Sure. So the formal definition of CDP is packaged software that builds a unified, persistent customer database that's accessible to other systems.
Okay.
So we can decompose that if you want. It's packaged software. It's something that you buy, you don't build, and it's integrated. It's one product that does all the things of collecting your data, putting it into customer profiles, cleaning it, doing the unification of data about the same person from different sources, and then sharing it out so any other system can use those profiles. So the three-word definition, I think it's 3 words, is CDPs build profiles.
Okay.
That's really what they do. And that distinguishes it from most of your other marketing technology, which often will create customer data through interactions with your website, or interactions with your email system, or interactions with your e-commerce system. But those don't usually import data from other places. They work with the data they create for themselves.
Okay.
And they are pretty much going to be silos. They don't really connect to anything else. So the CDP pulls the data out of all those systems and builds that unified profile with the data from all those systems, and then shares it back out. So your e-commerce platform knows what somebody did on the web.
Okay.
Or how they respond to the email, and so on. So you get a more complete picture of the customer, and then you share it with all the other systems.
Mm-hmm. Is executing or acting on that data, is that an essential part of a CDP, or is that not necessarily an aspect of it?
About 3/4 of the CDP have some capabilities along those lines, but it's not part of the core definition, again, that I just gave you.
Yeah.
But, you know, in a practical world, people want that capability, and the
Sure.
CDP vendors are happy to provide that. They all at least can do a segmentation.
Right.
They can all at least push out an audience list to someone. And many of them have full-blown campaign managers, interaction managers, and all the rest. But from my point of view, that's kind of peripheral. Again, users see that first, and that's what they really get excited about. But technically, that's just an afterthought.
Right. So there's obviously lots of value in having that unified view of the customer. So that, I don't want to act as if that's not a big value, because that's huge. But what is beyond just getting to that point, which, again, acknowledge, huge. Beyond that, what is a CDP good for? What are the sort of practical applications or use cases, if you will, of a CDP from a marketer's point of view?
Right. So you're talking about the activation side of things. So
Yeah.
There's kind of a hierarchy or a sequence or a maturity model that you go through. The first thing you do once you get that unified data, which you've never had before, is you analyze it. And the analysts get really excited because now they have something new to play with, right?
Right.
So you do your journey analysis and you do your attribution on your campaign performance. And you do all the other kind of profiling, the fun stuff that is really interesting and generates lots of good insights that then inform your marketing programs.
Right. I guess before you go on to that, I guess at that point, this is stuff you're probably doing with data that you had already, but now you can do this on this more unified, holistic view of the customer. I mean, that's
exactly.
the real value. Okay.
Right. You have a more complete view, and it's all been cleaned up and formatted. There's a lot of the work that the analysts do is really data prep, and you do it for one project, and then you start your next project, and you start all over again. So the CDP gives you this sort of ever clean, fresh, current source of nice, good data to work with. So it saves you a lot of that repetitive data preparation labor if you're a data scientist or an analyst.
Right.
The next thing you're going to do after you do that analysis is you're going to start to build predictive models. And again, the CDP gives you this very good, clean, reliable, updated data source to build those predictive models. So it saves you a lot of work there. And of course, the predictive models can be for segmentation, they can be for product recommendations, they can be for churn predictions, they can be for all kinds of things that are useful to use in your marketing programs. Mm-hmm. The next step after that is going to be your actual marketing campaigns. Usually you're going to start with your outbound audience lists. So for email or for advertising to push out a custom audience to Facebook or Google or whomever. Mm-hmm. And again, any kind of selection you want to do. And again, the benefit of doing it out of the CDP is you have more complete data, so you can do better segmentations. So that's where you really begin to make money, right? Now I can do my campaigns better. I can target better. I can send out fewer emails and get higher responses or make fewer phone calls if people still do phone calls, so on. Sure. And then after that really comes your real-time interactions. So your website personalization, for example, or letting your call center agent see what someone just did on the website so they can respond to that without having to ask too many questions and make more informed suggestions on what they should do, or see their purchase history, which wouldn't be in the call center system. You have to read it from someplace else. And the CDP makes that accessible. It's just part of the customer profile. Right. And then the highest level, if you will, is going to be your cross-channel orchestration. The CDP has a complete view of the customer, so it can say, this person contact them through SMS. That person send them a website pop-up the next time they show up. This person over here put them in a custom audience and target them through web advertising, and so on. So the CDP lets you orchestrate that, make sure you're sending consistent messages, make sure you're sending the right message in the right channel at the right time, which, of course, has always been the holy grail.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose as well, that's a cycle, right? So it goes all the way back to the beginning. So once you've gone through this campaign, now you're analyzing how did that campaign do and which channels work and all that sort of thing.
Right. Exactly. The CDP closes that loop quite nicely because it gets all the feedback and it can look at the results and not just the immediate response, which is easy to read, but the long-term impact of that campaign, which is tougher, but that's what you really want to know about.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. So what we're describing here, obviously, is I think you use the term holy grail in terms of the cross-channel optimization, but I think really what we're describing is, from a marketing point of view, it's exactly what marketers want. This is the thing that they need. In fact, I had a couple other conversations with marketers about what are their challenges. And the one thing that consistently comes up is, hey, I need this unified view of my consumer, who I'm talking to. So it's exactly what we're talking about here. So in that way, it makes me wonder, where have these things been all of our lives? Where did they come from? Clearly, this is something people want. So what sparked the idea to actually make this sort of a unified piece of software, it's a thing. It's a framework that people have now. So where did that come from? Where is that sourced?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I've been around the industry for more decades than I care to admit. So, I remember before these things. And, if you really go back to direct mail days before the internet, and again, I am that old. I don't look it, but I am. We only had a couple of channels, right? We had direct mail. And that was pretty much it. So it was a little easier to track that. You could just do everything within your direct mail system. It wasn't trivial. It was relatively straightforward. Right, then all of a sudden email pops up and later the web pops up. So now we begin to have multiple channels. And that's when things get challenging from a data perspective. Originally, what marketers did was they went out and they hired agencies, companies like Axiom and Experian, to build those databases for them because the marketers, of course, didn't have any technology resources back then in particular. And that's pretty much the way things were. There's all these custom-built data warehouses and databases, sometimes built by a third party. Sometimes your IT department would build it for you if you were in an industry where that was important. What changed in 2013, which is when I named the CDP category, is I began to see systems that were actually doing applications like predictive modeling or campaign management and building their own database. Before that, the database was built separately, and then you attached your predictive modeling tool or your campaign tool to that database. The technology had made that more possible. The need, because you had multiple channels, had become more pressing. IT departments really weren't stepping up to it for marketers. So there were a lot of marketers who themselves said, I tried to get my IT guys to do this and I just couldn't get it done. And they say, other people must be having the same problem. I'm going to start a company to solve this problem. So a lot of the early CDP vendors, if you look at their background, were actually started by marketers who said, this is a problem that a lot of people have to have. I'm going to see if I can build some software to solve that problem. The other place that it came from was the companies who were, again, doing predictive modeling or campaign management, whatever, who needed the data to be assembled to run their own application. So they had to kind of build it for themselves, if you will. And then they realized, hey, wait a minute, other systems could use the same data. I've created this thing that's way more valuable than the application that I built it to support because there's so many other applications it could support. So the focus of those companies shifted from the application with, oh, by the way, there's a database, to the database that, oh, by the way, maybe has an application. And that kind of grew. And what's interesting about it is it was very much a ground up kind of movement. A lot of technology developments in marketing are the big companies see something and they tell you, oh, you know what, here's a cool thing. Why don't you go buy it from Oracle or Adobe or Salesforce or whomever. And the CDP wasn't like that. It was really very much marketers and people supporting marketers and these independent companies kind of seeing this need and filling it, frankly, with a bit of resistance from some of the more established vendors who didn't see the need themselves. But eventually they came around because that's what you do when your customers demand something.
That's right. That's interesting. So where are we as a CDP industry, if you will? Where are we in a maturation model? Is this kind of full scale and it's growing, or are we at the early stages? Where would sort of an outsider, how should they assess how things are going right now?
Well, it's a little tricky to measure penetration. We see a lot of surveys and numbers are all over the map, and it really depends on how the survey was taken. But near as we can tell, most big organizations probably have a CDP today of some sort, and some of them have multiple CDPs. I would say the overall penetration rate of companies over say 100 million, because this is a relatively large company thing, might be around 30%. Companies over 10 billion, again, close to 80 or 90%, they're all going to have something. Some of those will be built in-house, which technically isn't a CDP because by definition, the CDP is packaged software. But if you cut yourself some slack and you say, okay, the in-house built ones count too, most everybody has some sort of a unified customer data store. And often those are used outside of marketing too now.
Got it. Yeah, and that was one thing I was going to just briefly touch on. Obviously, my focus is on marketing on this show, but I do know, having done some research on this, that CDPs are now used, like you suggested, outside of marketing. Can you just talk about that just briefly? Like, what are some of the other applications outside of marketing now that this is starting to take hold?
Well, what's happened in particular because of the pandemic, which has forced a lot of companies to do more digital things, is they've realized that, well, my salespeople and my customer support people and even my operations people, if they're interacting directly with customers, they all need, or at least would benefit from having this complete view of the customer.
Okay.
So often what will happen is the marketing people will pioneer the CDP effort within the company, and the other departments say, "Oh, you have that data? I need that data.
Right.
Will you share? What if I buy you lunch or whatever it takes to share nicely?"
Sure.
And then also the corporate IT people get involved, and they say, "Well, we're getting a lot of demand or requests from all my constituents throughout the company, and the CDP thing kind of seems to do what all those people want. So let me make this a corporate effort, not a marketing effort, so everybody can get the benefit." So there's been this migration, particularly in large enterprises, of the central IT people kind of stepping in and making it more of a corporate enterprise-wide program, not just a marketing program.
Got it. The other piece of maturation that I wanted to dig in with you on was across industries. So, is there a particular segment or industry where CDPs really got their start, and then what other industries followed suit, or was it not exactly developed in that way? Maybe it was a little more agnostic. Just where did it get started, and how are some of the industries doing right now?
Actually found a pretty clear pattern. The first industries were retail and media, like online media, like Netflix and stuff. And what those industries have in common is you have a lot of transactions.
Got it.
In a short amount of time, and you can measure results immediately. Either they clicked on a movie, or they didn't click on a movie. They bought a product, they didn't buy a product, right? So it's easy to measure, and there's clear value in getting your targeting better because you have a higher click rate, a higher sales
and probably
rate.
Also a lot of, it sounds like in those cases too, a lot of data signals that are coming from almost every action that's happening. So you got a lot of data to deal with, and to your point, a lot of immediate value. So I get that.
Yeah, a lot of immediate value, and relatively small ticket in most cases.
Sure.
Then there was the second wave of things like telco and financial services and travel, which were more the traditional database marketing industries. Those industries, along with retail, traditionally were the leaders in customer data management. They were a little lagging, apart from retail, with CDPs, partly because they already had pretty decent systems in place. Okay. So the gap wasn't quite as large, so the need wasn't quite so pressing. But also, if you think about it, those are less frequent purchases, bigger ticket, little different. In some cases, like financial and telco, you have bigger regulatory issues that make it a little harder to share the data outside the company. People are a little more concerned about that than they are. So there are a few reasons that kind of slowed their adoption a bit. But now most of those guys have come aboard, often incidentally, with systems that are designed specifically for that particular industry.
Of course, yeah.
Which lets them connect to the ticketing system or to the core banking system or whatever that relative system is for that particular industry. So it makes integration a little easier. And now there's a third wave. Things like healthcare, which is actually a very hot sector right now, pharma, education, even nonprofit, government, which again are even bigger tickets, even less frequent purchases, but still have customers, still want to give those customers the best experience possible, still have multiple data sources. So they all have the same fundamental need of getting that unified view and then using it to optimize the customer experience. So they all need a CDP. They just take some different amounts of time to recognize that CDPs even exist, and then to see how they would actually benefit.
Are there any industries that are not really, they're kind of laggards on all of this, and for maybe there's some systemic reasons for that, some obstacles to it?
I can't really think of a major industry where we haven't seen at least something.
Sure.
Where we don't see it is in a lot of small business.
Okay.
And that's just the nature of the beast. CDPs are big and complicated and expensive, and you really only need it if you have lots of data sources.
Right.
If you're just running a little Shopify thing, there are marketing systems that connect to Shopify, but all your data is in Shopify, so not a lot of unification going on, right? Gotcha. Or if you're, a hairdresser or an accountancy or something where you're basically a small business, there's much less need for that. So there are a few vendors who have tried to do small business CDPs, and there's some value to that, but it's a tricky thing to do. And so far, I would say that market is pretty much underpenetrated.
Got it. The next section of things I wanted to ask you about was really to kind of take you to your role that I think you do often, which is advising people who are evaluating vendors and things like that. So to get some advice for some of the marketers who might be listening in, and maybe I'm somebody who has said, "Hey, this is something I need." Maybe I have decided, "Hey, this is a project we need to take on," but I don't know where to start. So those beginning kind of first 2 or 3 things that I need to do. So I'm ready to jump into the CDP ocean. So what do I need to do? What are some things I need to do to get started on this journey?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's easy to understand what a CDP is. Unified profiles, got it.
Yep.
And everybody kind of, oh yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to have that. So it's kind of easy to sell that initial notion of the CDP. But then where people struggle is, well, what exactly am I going to do with it? What are my actual use cases? And that's really where you have to start, because your use cases drive your requirements. What are the specific data sources that I'm going to bring in? What particular data elements within those data sources do I need? What systems on the other end to deliver the results do I have to connect to? Because usually the CDP won't actually send out the email or do the website or so on. So you really have to think all that through, because that then tells you what to look for in your CDP. And this is where people get confused. And when people have problems with the CDP, and people do have problems, we won't say that it's all just,
of course,
primrose path here. It's because they haven't thought through those requirements.
Got it.
So they don't know what to buy. So they buy a system that, it's the most popular one, or the salesperson was effective, or it has a pretty interface, or whatever the reason. And this is for all kinds of software. I spent most of my adult life selling, helping people pick software. So I have a lot of scars on this one. People need really to focus on use cases, which drives requirements, and you have to select on requirements. So that's the biggest mistake they make. The other mistake, which is very closely related to that, and more in large organizations, is that some people in the organization will kind of get bitten by the CDP bug, and they'll see it and they'll have the vision, and they'll get all excited, and they'll go off and buy a CDP, but they won't engage the rest of the organization. They won't engage the actual people who are going to use it. For example, the CMO has this vision, and he's right or she's right. But then, I've seen that. I've been in those meetings where they go out and actually buy the CDP. And then you have the big kickoff meeting where you get all the marketing VPs in the room and all the IT folks in the room. And you say, hey, we bought this great thing. And they look at you like you have 3 heads. It's like, what is this thing? I never heard of it. What am I supposed to do with it? Why am I here? Where are the donuts?
Yes.
I mean, that's what they want to know, because they haven't been engaged. And again,
get that buy-in early on.
Yeah. And not just the buy-in, but the engage is like, no, make sure that you're really solving my problem. Make sure the use cases
that's a good point.
that you've chosen are really the use cases that I find most pressing and most valuable for me. Because if you don't keep them engaged all along, they're going to look at it at the other end and say, I don't know that there's any value in this for me. I'm a busy folk. I got other things to do. Convince me. So it shouldn't be that way. They should be drooling, eager to get that thing, not invited kind of out of the blue in some meeting for this new thing that, hi, I'm from IT. I'm here to help you. That doesn't necessarily go down that well.
Right. Well, and you've already kind of touched on this, but the next thing I was going to ask you about was, so you've selected the software, you've decided how you're going to go about this. Presumably you have come up with the use cases to do that. As you implement, what are some of those things that folks need to watch out for as they implement this within their marketing stack?
Well, data quality is probably the thing that causes the most problem during the initial implementation stage. People assume that their data is good, which is never a safe assumption. In fact, the safe assumption is the data is not good.
Assume it's bad.
And, you're more likely to be right on that one, and that's the way to bet. So you really need to look at the specific data, because nothing more annoying, right, than going in, I'm going to build this great model, and this great model is going to be based on these data elements, and say, oh, wait, those data elements don't exist, or they exist, but they're very poorly collected and inconsistent and dirty, and I just can't act. They're not very usable, or I have tons of work to do to make them usable. So that's probably the first really big mistake. Again, the buy-in, lack of training, lack of engagement of your users. I've already said this, but I'll say it again because it is probably the next biggest problem people run into is just not having support. And related but slightly different is organizational support. A lot of the use cases are going to involve coordination across departments that aren't necessarily used to working with each other.
Okay.
And you have to get those people on board, and that can be challenging, as you know, just because that's how organizations are. So, you really want to plot out your deployment quite carefully, quite strategically. What we recommend, honestly, is that you focus on one department at a time. So you get the guys in the email department to see what the CDP is, to understand, to know what data is in there, and let them work on a half dozen use cases. Really kind of get that down and get that up and running, and then go on to your advertising department. Don't do one use case in advertising, one in email, one in web personalization, because they have to train everybody in all those departments at once.
Got it.
It's a lot more work. They're going to get their one use case up, or maybe you'll sort of hand feed that use case. You'll set up a center of excellence, which is a good idea. And the COE guys will go out and they'll show, oh, here, look, this is where you would set up this use case for email. And the email guys go, okay, thank you very much. That's nice. Yeah, that works. Then we'll go back to the regular work. The COE guys goes off to the next department, and the email guy doesn't really know what to do. He just knows how to use this one tool that you gave him. So it doesn't get traction. So it's better to really get the email department up and running and kind of using it for themselves, let them build up some momentum, and then go on to the next one.
Yeah. One thing I'm wondering is, and maybe this is built into how the software might be developed by the different providers, but I can imagine that some of these companies that need this kind of one view don't necessarily have some of the data science prowess. They don't really have those engineers, if you will, that really know how to, or analysts rather, that know how to deal with the data. And I'm just trying to figure out, is that an obstacle, or is that the reason you bring in a CDP? So I don't have data scientists. I don't have a team of analysts. I need to wrangle this data. Again, is that going to be something that says, nope, you're not going to be able to do as a CDP until you can get that? Or nope, that's why you bring in a CDP. Just trying to figure out that cut point.
Okay, so you have data scientists and you have data engineers, and they're a little different. And you're really talking more, I think, about data engineers here. So most, I don't want to disrespect IT departments in general. It's not fair because they're all different, and they're all doing the best that they can do. But many of them, outside of a few industries, have really not had a lot of reason to deal with customer data in the way that marketers deal with customer data. Okay. So there's again, there are exceptions. Financial services has done a lot of this for years because of anti-fraud and know your customer and money laundering, things like that. But most industries just hasn't really been that need. So the IT department, which has many other things on its plate, hasn't really developed that expertise. So it's really good to bring in an outside resource like a CDP vendor or an experienced consultant or consultancy that does have that skill set. The CDP automates a lot of things. It pre-integrates all these different components that you need, so that it makes it a lot easier, but you still need people to know what they're doing. And, I've had interesting discussions with IT folks, but the real work is all in, understanding your data and collecting it, and whether you buy packaged software or you do it in-house. That's the same work. It's true so far as it goes. So there's definitely going to have the IT guys involved, guys and gals, because they control access to the data. You're not going to get anything done without them. But if you can make their life easier and you can offload a lot of the work into the system in an automated fashion or onto some third party like professional services or consultancies, then you're just much more likely to get stuff happen. So that's a reason definitely to buy a CDP, is to gather the expertise and take advantage of the expertise of someone outside your own group.
Makes sense. You talked a little bit about going deep on one function. So like your email versus advertising as your example. Is that the kind of early wins that you can expect to get? So once you've implemented, you kind of work through some of those obstacles. Is it really that you're able to then turn some function, actually improve it, I guess is the right way to say it, improve some function? Is that the kind of early win, or maybe there are some other early wins that you have seen are pretty typical when people really implement these?
People really want things that generate revenue. We're in business. That's what we want to do.
That's
so
what we do. Yep.
So, most of the focus of the people who buy CDPs or advocating for their company to buy a CDP is on those sort of revenue generating results. So marketing campaigns or personalization, anything that's going to give a better response rate. Interestingly, a lot of the early benefit comes in just labor cost savings. I'm not spending as much time assembling data sets. I can run more campaigns. I can run more refined campaigns with smaller segments because it's not as much work for my data engineers and for my data scientists to do that stuff. So that's not direct revenue generation, but it's a direct cost saving. So you get this funny kind of divergence between what people think they're going to see as their initial benefits, which is more revenue, and what they actually see, which is less cost and less labor. So both are valuable. And, I'll take the cost savings, right? That's real money too.
Absolutely.
But that's not the way you sell these things. Nobody gets excited by cost savings. They get excited by revenue. So we have to talk about the revenue stuff. And then, oh, by the way, you're going to save some costs too. And of course, everybody's very happy when that happens.
But it sounds like that might be realistic expectations, like the immediate benefit might be more of cost savings in order to get to the long term of the revenue increase. That's what it sounds like.
And again, I'm not saying the revenue increase doesn't happen in the short term. No. It does. But, you're going to have one little program that you're going to run that's going to generate X. Unless it's a super massive program, the revenue, you'll get a 30-40% doubling of revenue or doubling of profit, but, on some relatively smaller program. So, the dollar benefit's kind of limited. It shows the potential, whereas the cost savings is going to be multiplied across everything that uses your customer data. So it's actually going to be more substantial in the early stages. Eventually, it will be dwarfed by the revenue value, no question about it. In those early stages, it actually can be quite substantial.
Makes sense. Thank you. So to wrap up our conversation, I just want to give you the opportunity to let anybody that's listening, that's interested, know where can they learn more about the Institute, what you guys are doing. Maybe you have some events or programs that are coming up that you want to talk about. Just want to give you the opportunity to talk about what you guys are up to right now.
Okay, well, it's www.cdpinstitute.org is the website they should go to. I really should have on a big banner behind my head here to get that built up. And that's really the main way that we educate the market. There's a huge library of white papers. There are tools like an RFP generator and a use case generator. There's a daily newsletter that has an event calendar of various webinars and stuff that other people, that members of the Institute do, sponsors of the Institute. We run the occasional program ourselves, but we really just are helping other people reach the industry and reach the audience of folks who are interested. So we're kind of a conduit. So there's tons of great resources, if we do say so ourselves, on that website, and that www.cdpinstitute.org is the place to go.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, thank you, David. Appreciate the time and the conversation. I hope this was beneficial to those listening. I know I learned a lot. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.